Imagine, if you will, a girl of only 14, standing at the edge of a vast, silent forest, ordered to strip away every garment, every memory, and even her own name, just to satisfy the pride of two ancient empires. We know her as the tragic Queen of France, a name etched in the fires of history. But before the world judged her, before the mobs gathered and the stones were cast, she was simply Antonia, a child lost in a palace of 3,000 flickering candles. Tonight, we are not looking for the queen who wore the diamonds. We are looking for the girl who disappeared behind the gold. As you settle into the stillness of your own space, let the heavy weight of the modern world dissolve like mist over the winding banks of the Seine. You are safe here, drifting back through the layers of time to a place where the air smells of old stone, lavender, and the coming rain. Feel the support beneath you, the quiet rhythm of your own breath, as we approach the great, gilded gates of Versailles. The metal is cold, the gold is worn by centuries of sun, and as they creak open, they do so not for a revolution, but for a person, a young woman who carried the impossible weight of a nation within the folds of her silken skirts. The night air of the palace gardens has a way of carrying the past, a gentle, rhythmic murmur that weaves through the tall, shadowed windows of the Hall of Mirrors. If you listen closely, in the spaces between your thoughts, you can almost hear the soft, ghost-like rustle of silk against marble, and the faint hypnotic ticking of 1,000 gilded clocks, each one marking a time that no longer exists. I invite you now to let go of the day's burdens. Imagine the moonlight spilling across the manicured lawns, turning the fountains into silver statues that stand watch over the silence. Everything here is hushed, held in a velvet embrace, waiting for a story that has been whispered for centuries. The story of Marie Antoinette is so often told in shouts and the roar of a hungry crowd, the sharp strike of steel, or the frantic ink of a political pamphlet. But tonight, we shall listen to it in the quietest of sighs. To truly understand her, we must strip away the myth and the scandal, seeing her not as a symbol of excess, but as a soul caught in the gears of a world she never asked to lead. There is a strange, profound peace in realizing that even the most legendary figures in history once had a beginning filled with nothing but light and the simple, quiet dreams of a child who just wanted to be loved. As the shadows in your room lengthen and your eyes grow heavy, let the harsh edges of reality fade into a soft focus mist. We are moving away from the noise of the present and into the gentle glow of a winter morning in the heart of the Austrian Empire. Before there was Versailles, there was the Hofburg. Before there was the Queen of France, there was a princess in Vienna, dancing through hallways of white and gold, unaware that the path she walked would lead her so far from home. The journey begins where the snow falls softest, in the quiet corridors of her youth, where the world was still kind, the air was still cool, and her mother's voice was the only law she knew. Close your eyes now, and let the image of the great gates fade into the soft, white blankets of an Austrian winter. We are stepping through the threshold of time, leaving the heavy palace of France behind for a moment, to find the little girl who still lives in the memories of the snow. The light is dimming, the hearth is warm, and the story is just beginning to breathe. Listen to the silence between the words. Feel the coolness of the marble beneath your feet, and the warmth of the fire in the distance. We are going back to the very start, to the cradle of an empire, where a young Maria Antonia sleeps, unaware of the crown that awaits her in the dark. As we drift further, the scent of the French gardens is replaced by the crisp, pine-scented air of the mountains. The grand, imposing halls of Versailles melt away, turning into the cozy, intimate chambers of Schönbrunn Palace. Here, the world is smaller, safer, and filled with the laughter of siblings rather than the whispers of courtiers. It is in this stillness that her soul was formed, long before the world decided who she was supposed to be. Let yourself drift now, sinking deeper into the soft cushions of history, as we find the child Antonia in the heart of Vienna, where the snow falls like lace against the window panes, and the night is long and full of peace. The journey towards the end of an era starts with the simplest of moments a mother's hand. A tutor's book, a game played in the palace gardens. Let these images float through your mind like autumn leaves on a still pond. There is no rush, no urgency, only the slow, steady pulse of a life about to unfold. We are entering the sanctuary of her childhood, a place where she was protected, where the name Marie Antoinette did not yet exist, and where the only crown she wore was one of flowers picked from the imperial meadows. This is the place of her true self, the foundation of the woman she would become, hidden away in the soft, golden light of a Viennese afternoon. The echoes of the French court are fading now, replaced by the melodic chimes of Austrian clocks. We have left the gates, we have crossed the border, and we have found the girl. In this quiet space, we shall begin her true story, a story of a human heart beating beneath the weight of history. The light is soft, the bed is warm, and the journey into the past is the only path left to follow. The world is asleep, the palace is still, and we are finally home in the quietude of her earliest memories. The world of Versailles, with its cold, unforgiving marble and its rigid, suffocating etiquette, feels like a distant and half-forgotten dream as we settle deeper into the soft, white embrace of an Austrian winter. We have traveled back, far beyond the reach of modern noise, to the mid-18th century, a time where the air is crisp, sharp with the scent of ancient pine needles, and the clean, mineral breath of the coming snow. Here, in the very heart of Vienna, the grand stone walls of the Hofburg Palace do not feel like a fortress of power, but like a warm, protective shell for a young soul. Imagine the sound of your own footsteps, completely muffled by the thick, ornate carpets that line the endless galleries, as you wander through corridors painted in shades of cream, buttergold, and soft ivory. The atmosphere here is not heavy with secrets, but filled with a gentle, domestic hum, the distant, lyrical echo of children's laughter trailing down a hallway, the delicate clinking of fine porcelain teacups in a sun-drenched breakfast room, and the rhythmic, comforting crackle of dry logs burning inside a great, white porcelain stove. This is the world of Marie Antoinette, the girl who would one day be known to the world as Marie Antoinette. But for now, in this quiet sanctuary, she is simply the 15th child of an empress. She is a small, bright spirit tucked away in the safety of a sprawling imperial family, where the weight of the crown is still many years and many miles away. Life in Vienna was a rich, slow tapestry of grand traditions, woven together with surprisingly simple, human joys. While her mother, the formidable Empress Maria Theresa, ruled a vast and complicated empire with a legendary iron will, the private lives of her children were marked by a rare and precious kind of freedom. Picture the young Antonia, her hair light and unpowdered, running through the long, echoing galleries of Schönbrunn Palace. Her footsteps are light, rhythmic, echoing against the polished wooden floors that smell faintly of beeswax and history. There is a beautiful lack of the suffocating formality that would later come to define every waking second of her life in France. Here, she is allowed to be breathless. Here, she could play in the sprawling imperial gardens until her cheeks were flushed a deep, healthy pink by the bracing mountain air. She was never alone, yet never scrutinized. She was surrounded by a sea of siblings, brothers and sisters who shared her tutors, her wooden toys, and her whispered secrets in the dark. In these early golden years, she was just one star in a vast, crowded constellation, protected by the immense shadow of her mother's power and the genuine, unforced affection of a household that felt, above all else, like a home. At the absolute center of this world stood the Empress herself, a woman of immense political gravity, and yet, within these walls, a source of maternal warmth. Maria Theresa was a figure of legendary strength, a woman who reshaped Europe, yet Antonia saw her through the soft, uncomplicated eyes of a youngest daughter. Imagine the Empress sitting in her private study, a room that smells of old parchment, heavy ink, and flickering beeswax candles, as she pauses from the exhausting affairs of state to simply stroke her daughter's golden hair. There was a profound sense of order in this palace, a quiet, underlying feeling that as long as the Empress was on her throne, the world was exactly as it should be. The young princess lived in a state of blissful, perfect ignorance. Her days were not measured by political alliances, but by the slow progress of music lessons on the harpsichord, the steady repetition of basic embroidery stitches, and the quiet, rhythmic prayers chanted in the Austrian chapel. It was a life of safe, rhythmic predictability, where the greatest tragedy was a sudden rainy afternoon that kept her from the gardens, or a difficult passage of music that her small fingers couldn't quite master. However, beneath this layer of warmth and security lay a truth that Antonia was too young to grasp. But in the grand, cold design of the Habsburg Empire, she was never intended to be the centerpiece of history. She was the extra daughter, the youngest girl in a family where her elder sisters were the ones carefully groomed for the most prestigious and demanding crowns of Europe. She was the delightful afterthought of the imperial nursery, the charming child who was allowed to remain a child for just a little longer, because the heavy weight of the world was meant to fall on older, stronger shoulders. There is a deep, poetic irony in this, that the woman who would become the most scrutinized, photographed, and judged figure in the history of the world began her life as a largely overlooked princess. She was a girl whose primary duty was simply to be a happy, healthy member of the household. She was free to be Antonia, to indulge in the sweetness of sugar plums and the innocence of childhood games, without the looming shadow of the guillotine or the blinding, hostile glare of a public that would one day demand her blood. As the long evening settles over the rooftops of Vienna, the palace transforms into a sanctuary of soft textures and low, amber light. Imagine the heavy, comforting weight of a velvet dress being slipped over her shoulders, its deep crimson fabric cool to the initial touch, but quickly growing warm against her skin. The rooms are filled with the soft, melodic sounds of Austrian lullabies, perhaps played on a distant, solitary violin or hummed softly by a nursemaid in the corner of the nursery. These melodies are the invisible soundtrack of her safety, a rhythmic anchor that tells her she is cherished, she is home, and she is whole. The air is thick with the comfort of tradition, a kind of peace that can only exist when you truly believe your world is unbreakable. You can almost feel the incredible softness of the down pillows as she is tucked into her bed, the heavy silk curtains drawn tight against the biting winter wind, leaving only the dying glow of the hearth to dance slowly across the ceiling. But even in this deep, restorative quiet, the invisible gears of history were beginning to grind. While Antonia slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the innocent, letters were being exchanged across the snowy peaks of the continent. These letters were sealed with heavy, crimson wax and carried by exhausted messengers who rode through the night, through mountain passes and lonely forests. The peace of Vienna was about to be interrupted by a single, thin piece of parchment, a letter from the French court of Versailles that would act like a heavy stone thrown into a perfectly still pond. It was a proposal, a cold marriage contract designed to bridge the gap between two ancient, bloody rivals. It was a document that would demand the sacrifice of a child's innocence in exchange for the fragile stability of an era. The letter carried the name of the Dauphin of France, and with it, the silent, sudden end of Antonia's life as a carefree Austrian princess. The warmth of the Hofburg began to feel, almost overnight, like a fading dream. The snowy corridors, the easy laughter of her sisters, and the protective, steady hand of her mother were suddenly revealed to be finite things, treasures that were being counted and weighed before they were taken away forever. As the soft light of her childhood began to dim, a new, much harsher light was rising in the distant west. The transition had begun, a slow, inevitable movement from the safe, predictable haven of Vienna toward the border of a land she did not know, and a people she did not understand. The girl who was never meant to be queen was now being summoned to the most volatile and dangerous throne in all of Europe. The music of the Austrian lullaby was beginning to fade, replaced in the distance by the heavy, metallic thud of a carriage door closing, marking the exact moment when Maria Antonia started her long, one-way journey away from the snow and toward the gold. In your mind's eye, see her one last time in the gardens of her youth. She is a small, solitary figure in a white dress, silhouetted against the vast, pale blue of the Austrian sky. Feel the absolute stillness of that final moment of peace before the world rushes in to claim her. The snow is beginning to fall again, light and silent as feathers, covering the tracks of her childhood, as if trying to protect them from the future that is racing toward her. Breathe in that crisp, pine-scented mountain air one last time, and let the profound sense of safety it brings wrap around you like a heavy blanket. The warmth of the hearth is behind her now, and the road ahead is paved in the finest gold, but it is lined with shadows that she cannot yet see. We move now, slowly and gently, from the flickering firelight of her home to the cold, glittering, and complicated reality of a destiny she never chose, but was born to endure. The carriage is waiting. The horses are restless in the cold morning air, their breath rising in white clouds. The world she knew is folding in on itself, becoming a memory even as she stands within it. She looks back at the palace windows, the glass reflecting the pale winter sun, and realizes that the person who returns to this place will not be the girl who is leaving it. Every step she takes toward the border is a step away from the Antonia who laughed in the gardens, and a step toward the Marie Antoinette who would weep in the dark. But for now, the journey is quiet. The wheels turn slowly over the cobblestones, the rhythm of the road acting as a new, steady heartbeat. We follow her now, leaving the safety of the nest, drifting across the map of Europe toward the place where the sun never sets, and where the air is thick with the scent of lilies and the weight of 1,000 years of kings. As we leave the flickering domestic hearths of Vienna behind, the air around us begins to change. It grows cooler, more formal, becoming heavy with the invisible, lingering scent of old ink, dried wax, and the dusty, quiet breath of centuries-old imperial archives. We are moving away from the intimate safety of the nursery and the laughter of siblings, stepping instead into the vast, silent halls where the world is reshaped by men in powdered wigs and velvet coats. Close your eyes and imagine a map of Europe spread across a massive, dark oak table, its edges curled and yellowed with age, the colors of the various kingdoms bleeding softly into one another like ink caught in a gentle rain. To the powerful ministers, the kings, and the emperors of the 18th century, this map was not a collection of homes, dreams, or families. It was a grand, cold chessboard of calculated moves and silent victories. And there, in the very center of this immense board, positioned among the heavy, carved wooden pieces representing marching armies and disputed territories, sat a small, delicate figure made of finest porcelain and shimmering silk. This was the political bargain that would bridge two of the most powerful and volatile empires. On Earth, a 14-year-old girl who was being transformed, day by slow day, into a living bridge across a river of blood and history. The negotiations between the House of Austria and the House of Bourbon were conducted in a language of terrifying, mathematical precision. Imagine the quiet, rhythmic scratching of dozens of quill pens moving across thick, heavy sheets of vellum, a sound that, in the cavernous silence of the staterooms, feels like a constant whisper against your ear. Each long, deliberate stroke of the pen was a stitch in the fabric of Antonia's future, binding her to a destiny she had never requested. There was no room in these tall rooms for her personal preferences, her childhood fears, or the simple dreams of a girl who loved the Austrian woods. The diplomat spoke in low, monotonous tones of alliances, provisos, and dynastic security terms that sounded as cold and unyielding as the polished marble floors they walked upon. They were trading a human life for the promise of a temporary peace. For decades, France and Austria had been the bitterest of rivals, their shared history stained by the smoke of endless wars and the grief of countless generations. Now, The fragile peace of millions of people rested entirely on the narrow, fragile shoulders of a girl who still found her greatest joy in playing with her dogs in the sun-drenched gardens of Schönbrunn. The true immersion into her life begins here, not an immersion in the joys of royalty, but an immersion in the crushing, silent gravity of the state. Feel the weight of that responsibility as it begins to settle over her, layer by layer, like a heavy, ermine-lined cloak that is far too large and far too heavy for her young frame. While other children her age were learning the simple, rhythmic lessons of the classroom or the grace of a private dance, Antonia was being forced to learn the terrifying and lonely art of being a symbol. She was instructed with agonizing detail on how to walk with a specific gravity, how to tilt her head to acknowledge a superior, and how to smile in a way that conveyed everything the court desired while revealing nothing of her own heart. Her body was no longer her own possession. It had become a vessel for the desperate hopes of an entire empire. Imagine the long, silent hours she spent being fitted for her new French gowns, standing perfectly still like a statue as seamstresses pinned layers of heavy brocade, stiff crinoline, and delicate lace around her small, narrowing waist. Each sharp pin was a quiet reminder that her life was being tailored to fit a role she had never auditioned for. The grand scale of the world's expectations began to loom over her daily life, like the immense shadow of a mountain at sunset, making the simple, sunny days of her Vienna youth feel like a distant memory from a completely different lifetime. And here's the quiet, hidden truth beneath the layers of rustling silk and the elaborate flourishes of the diplomat's pens. Antonia was not being sent to France to be a bride in the way we understand love, nor was she even being sent to be a queen in the modern sense. She was being sent as a peace treaty in human form. She was the physical manifestation of a signature on a page, a living, breathing guarantee that the cannons on the borders would remain silent and the kingly lines would remain secure. If she failed to please the aging French king, if she failed to provide a healthy heir to the throne, or if she simply failed to be the perfect, unwavering reflection of Austrian grace, the fragile peace of all Europe might shatter like glass on stone. She was the most expensive and delicate bridge ever constructed, built from the very flesh and blood of the Habsburgs to span the vast, echoing distance to the Bourbons. This was the weight of destiny that no 14-year-old should ever have to carry alone, the heavy, constant knowledge that the lives of thousands of soldiers and the stability of ancient thrones depended entirely on her ability to navigate a court she had never seen and a language she had not yet mastered. As the preparations for her departure reached their frantic yet hushed peak, the Palace of Vienna becomes a place of rhythmic, almost hypnotic motion. Listen to the sound of the world preparing to move her across the map. There is the steady, repetitive scratch, scratch of the quill pens as the final binding contracts are signed and sealed with heavy red wax, a sound as constant and soothing as the falling of dry leaves in autumn. There is the low, muffled thud of heavy travel trunks being packed with fine linens, sparkling jewels, and the remnants of her childhood, and the soft, metallic jingle of silver harnesses being polished to a high mirror shine in the imperial stables. These sounds form a lullaby of inevitable motion, a slow cadence of departure that seems to pulse through the very stone walls of the palace. Imagine the great wooden wheels of the imperial carriages being greased with thick oil, the rhythmic clack-clack of the craftsman's wooden tools creating a slow, steady heartbeat for the long journey that lies ahead. The entire world seems to be exhaling a long, slow breath of anticipation as the date of her departure draws near. The quiet, playful atmosphere of the nursery is gone forever, replaced by the humming, low-frequency vibration of a destiny that has finally, irrevocably been set in motion. The air in the Hofburg grows thin and heavy with the silent tension of the impending goodbye. Every meal shared in the grand dining hall, every evening prayer in the private chapel, and every lingering glance from her mother, the Empress, is now laden with the heavy, unspoken knowledge that this is the last time. The grand, sprawling scale of the empire seems to shrink down until it is the size of a single small girl standing in a vast doorway, looking back one last time at the only life she has ever known. You can almost feel the vibration of the horses' hooves in the courtyard below, a low, constant tremor that echoes in the very soles of your feet as you stand beside her. The transition is no longer just a lines on a map or a concept in a history book. It is becoming a physical, breathing reality. The maps of Europe have been folded and put away. The ink has long since dried on the heavy parchment, and the dowry of gold and jewels has been counted and locked. The girl who was simply Antonia is being packed away into the dark interiors of the trunks, along with her Austrian childhood dresses. And the majestic, complicated creature, known as the Dauphine of France, is ready to emerge into the light. The journey to the border is not merely a trip across the land. It is a slow-motion unraveling of one human identity to make room for another. Imagine the heavy carriage moving slowly, relentlessly through the beautiful Austrian countryside. The rhythmic thump-thump of the wooden wheels over the ancient cobblestones, acting as a slow metronome for her private thoughts. Outside the window, the familiar, jagged mountains of her home are slowly, mile by mile, being replaced by the rolling, unfamiliar hills of the west. Each mile traveled is a silken cord being cut, a vital link to her past being gently but very firmly severed. The transition is soft and melancholic, like the slow fading of a long sunset, as the safety of Vienna melts into the vast, foggy uncertainty of the open road. The child is being carried toward a river, a natural boundary that marks the official end of her innocence and the beginning of her transformation into a legend. Breathe in the scent of the dusty, sun-warmed road and the cool, damp air of the deep forests as the carriage rolls on through the gathering twilight. The world is so vast, the road is so long, and the destination is a place of blinding gold and deep, treacherous shadows. We are drifting with her now, caught in the slow, powerful current of a history that moves with the irresistible force of a deep ocean tide. The map of Europe is no longer a chessboard, sitting on a table in a quiet room. It is the very ground beneath her turning wheels, the cold reality she must now inhabit. As we move closer to the border and the River Rhine, let the steady, rhythmic pulse of the carriage wheels lull you into a state of deep, heavy, and absolute stillness. The girl is traveling. The treaty is sealed in blood and ink, and the river is waiting patiently to claim her. We are leaving the warmth of the home forever, moving toward the edge of the world she knew, and into the immerse of a grand, glittering, and terrifying new life that awaits her just across the water. The heavy, rhythmic vibration of the carriage wheels finally ceases, replaced by a silence so profound and absolute that it feels as though the world itself is holding its breath in a moment of sacred anticipation. We have reached the very edge of the known world, the thin, invisible line where one life ends and another begins. Imagine standing on the quiet, mist-covered banks of the Rhine River, where the water flows deep, slow, and grayish-shimmering, endless ribbon of liquid glass separating two vast and vastly different destinies. In the very center of this wide, ancient river sits a small, wooded island, a lonely piece of neutral ground belonging to neither Austria nor France. This is the stage for the handover, a place that exists outside of maps, outside of politics, and almost outside of time itself. Here, a temporary wooden pavilion has been carefully constructed, draped in fine, heavy silks that flutter slightly in the river breeze, yet it stands on fragile, temporary foundations. To the young Antonia, looking out through the small, fogged carriage window, this island is more than just a geographic coordinate. It is the terrifying, silent threshold of her very soul. It is a place of profound and soft transition, where the girl she was must be left behind on the eastern bank so that a queen can be born on the western one. Step out of the carriage with her now and feel the damp, cool mist of the river clinging to your skin like a soft, invisible veil. The air here is heavy and incredibly still, filled with the grounding, earthy scent of wet wood, freshwater silt, and the damp, mossy earth of the riverbank. As she is led toward the pavilion, she is entering a ritual of systematic and heartbreaking loss, a slow-motion unraveling of everything she has ever known. Inside these temporary wooden walls, the French officials wait with a cold, ceremonial hunger, their faces unreadable and masked by the dim, filtered light. The rules of the handover are absolute, ancient, and completely unyielding. She must bring nothing, absolutely nothing, of her old life into her new one. Imagine the scene as her Austrian attendants, the women who have brushed her hair, mended her lace, and sung to her in the quiet hours since she was a small child, are ordered to step back into the long shadows. One by one, the physical layers of her identity are being stripped away in a silence, broken only by the rhythmic rustle of heavy fabric. Her warm Austrian gowns, woven with the sunlight and memories of Vienna, are unlaced and removed. Her jewelry, precious gifts from her mother, the Empress, is taken from her skin and boxed away in velvet-lined crates. Even her beloved dogs, the small, warm, breathing creatures that were her only source of unconditional comfort and the last scent of home, are pulled from her arms. To the diplomats, these are just logistical details of a peace treaty, but to a 14-year-old girl, each item removed is a piece of her heart being torn away in the cold, indifferent morning light. The body of this moment is defined by a deep, quiet, and overwhelming vulnerability. Picture her standing in the very center of the pavilion, surrounded by a circle of strangers whose eyes are cold with appraisal and expectation. She is being redressed in the French fashion, a process that feels more like an initiation than a simple change of clothes. Every garment she now puts on, the stiff, bone-reinforced corsets, the voluminous silk panniers that spread like wings, the delicate, translucent lace chemise is a gift from the French king, a uniform of her new lifelong service. She is being reconstructed as a French creature, piece by piece, layer by layer, until the Austrian girl is buried deep beneath yards of blue and silver silk. But beneath the expensive, rhythmic rustle of the new fabric, there is a subtle trembling that no amount of finery can hide. This is the true human connection of her story, the universal, primal fear of standing before a completely new life, stripped of every single thing that once made us feel safe and known. We have all had these moments in our own lives, moments where we felt exposed and small, where the familiar was taken away, and we were forced to face the unknown with nothing but our own quiet, steady breath. In this cold, wooden pavilion on the Rhine, Antonia is the living embodiment of that human fragility, a small flame burning in the center of a vast, dark forest. And here is the haunting and poetic reveal of the handover. Antonia stepped into France naked, both literally and figuratively. According to the strict, bizarre protocols of the time, she had to be completely undressed in a neutral room so that not even a single, tiny thread of Austrian fabric touched the sacred soil of France. She stood for a long, suspended moment between two great empires, possessing nothing in the world. Not a chemise, not a ribbon, not even the name she had been called by since her very first breath. She was a blank slate, a hollow vessel waiting to be filled with the heavy expectations and the ruthless, glittering requirements of a foreign court. She was stripped of her past so thoroughly that she became a ghost of herself before she even reached the other shore. This was not just a change of wardrobe. It was a symbolic erasure of the self, a quiet death of the child, so the royal icon could be born. When she finally stepped out of the western door of the pavilion, she was no longer the Marie Antoinette of the Hofburg. She was Marie Antoinette, the Dauphine of Francais girl who had been hollowed out by ceremony and refilled with the cold, unmoving weight of the crown. As she waits for the final procession to begin, let the sounds of the river become her lullaby and yours. Listen to the gentle, hypnotic lapping of the Rhine's water against the wooden pilings of the island. It is a rhythmic, liquid sound, a soft slap, a long ripple, and a deep, watery sigh, a cadence that speaks of things being carried away by the current, never to return. The water does not care about treaties, titles, or the fragile hearts of princesses. It only knows how to move forward, relentless, slow, and inevitable. Imagine the soft, ghostly rustle of the wind through the silk hangings of the pavilion, a sound like a long, drawn-out exhale from the forest itself. These sounds are steady, slow, and repetitive, pulling you deeper and deeper into a state of heavy contemplative rest. The world is reduced to the sound of water and the distant, muffled voices of the guards standing watch on the banks. There is no more rushing now, no more packing of travel trunks, only the profound stillness of a girl standing on a tiny island in the mist, waiting for her life to begin again in a language she is still learning to speak in her dreams. The transition is nearly complete, and the world on the other side of the water waits with bated breath. The Austrian side of the river is now a blur of gray trees and fading memories, disappearing slowly into the thick white fog of the past. The path forward leads to a long, shimmering line of black and gold carriages waiting on the French shore, their oil lamps flickering like distant grounded stars in the morning gloom. The air here smells different. It is richer, perhaps, with the heavy, musky scent of lilies and expensive perfumes, but it also feels sharper, colder, and more unpredictable than the air of home. You can feel the subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure as she prepares to take her very first step onto French soil. The soft transition is reaching its end, and the hard, glittering reality of her new existence is about to take its final permanent shape. The girl who lost everything on a small island in the Rhine is now walking toward a destiny that will give her the entire world, only to eventually demand her life in return as payment for the gold. And then, as she emerges from the shadows of the pavilion, the transition finds its human focus in the mist. Through the morning dampness and the steam rising from the horse's breath, she catches her first true glimpse of the French royal party. At the very center of the shimmering, bowing crowd of courtiers stands a young man, awkward and silent, his eyes downcast against the sudden brilliance of the sun reflecting off the gray water. This is the Dauphin, the grandson of the Sun King, the boy who is now her husband, her partner, and her inevitable, tragic fate. He is a stranger in a coat of heavy gold lace, a boy who looks just as overwhelmed and frightened as she feels in this moment of meeting. Their eyes meet for a fleeting, crystalline second, a quiet collision of two terrified children caught in the massive, uncaring machinery of history. The transition is over. The safe world of Vienna has dissolved into the river like salt in water. The journey to the heart of France has truly begun, and as the heavy carriage door closes once more with a muffled, final thud, the sound of the river fades away, replaced by the heavy, inevitable, and rhythmic beat of a French drum, leading her toward the gold and the shadows. Breathe in the cool, damp air of the riverbank one last time, feeling its freshness settle deep in your lungs. Feel the profound stillness of the water as it flows beneath the island, carrying the discarded pieces of her childhood away into the dark, silent depths of the sea. We are moving now, leaving the neutral ground behind forever, traveling deeper and deeper into a land of exquisite beauty and hidden, sharp thorns. The girl is gone. The Dauphine is here, wrapped in silk and expectation. Let the steady, hypnotic rhythm of the new horse's hooves on the French road lull you into a deeper, more profound sleep. The river is behind us, the border is crossed, and the long, winding path to Versailles lies open, glowing softly in the uncertain, golden light of a new and permanent dawn that promises both everything and nothing at all. The world of Versailles does not greet you with a whisper, but with a blinding golden roar that seems to vibrate through the very marrow of your bones. As your carriage crests the final hill and the iron-wrought gates swing open, the palace reveals itself not merely as a building, but as a sprawling, sun-drenched mountain of stone, glass, and gold leaf, stretching out across the horizon like a defiant challenge to the sky itself. Imagine the sheer, staggering scale of this place, where the horizon is meticulously carved into symmetrical gardens, and the air is thick with the scent of 1,000 blooming lilies, and the sharp, metallic tang of expensive fountain water hitting ancient marble. This is the ultimate immersion, the Golden Trap, a masterpiece of human vanity designed by the Sun King to ensure that no soul who entered could ever truly find their way out again. For the young Marie Antoinette, stepping onto the charcoal-dusted cobblestones of the royal courtyard, the grandeur is so immense it feels almost predatory. The sky above Versailles seems higher, the sun brighter, and the shadows longer, as if the laws of nature themselves have been bent to serve the glory of the French throne. Close your eyes and visualize the Hall of Mirrors at the peak of an evening gala. The room is a tunnel of light, 300 feet long, illuminated by the flickering glow of 3,000 individual beeswax candles. The light does not just sit in the air, it bounces off 17 enormous, arched mirrors, multiplying the flames until it feels as though you are standing inside the heart of a diamond. The ceiling, painted with the clouds and gods of a forgotten Olympus, seems to float above the heat of the candles. The air is warm, smelling of melted wax, expensive musk, and the faint, sweet scent of rosewater. There is a weight to the beauty here, a sensory overload that makes the head light and the heart beat a little faster. You are surrounded by a sea of unmoving faces, a forest of powdered wigs and shimmering diamonds, all reflected infinitely in the glass. It is a world where the line between reality and reflection has been permanently blurred. And for a girl of 14, it is a dizzying, beautiful, and terrifying ocean of gold. To live in Versailles is to live in a state of perpetual, exhausting performance, where the concept of private simply does not exist. The body of this life is governed by the absolute, crushing weight of ceremony. Imagine the young Dauphine waking up in a bed draped in heavy, gold-threaded damask, only to find that her bedroom is already crowded with people. This is the levee, the ritual of the waking, before she has even rubbed the sleep from her eyes. The highest-ranking noblewomen of France are already standing in her chamber, watching her every breath. There is a precise, unyielding ritual for every single second. One lady of honor has the right to hand her her chemise, another has the right to pour the scented water for her face. A third has the right to hold the mirror. If a princess of higher blood enters the room midway through the dressing, the garment must be taken off and handed to the newcomer to be put back on. She stands shivering in the center of the room, a human doll being dressed by a committee, while the court watches to see if she pales, if she sighs, or if she dares to look tired. This lack of privacy extends until the very last moment of the day, during the coucher, or the ritual of the sleeping. The same crowd that watched her rise now watches her retire. The heavy silk curtains are drawn by specific hands. The candles are extinguished in a specific order, and the doors are locked by a specific officer of the guard. There is no moment where she is not a spectacle. Imagine the psychological toll of never being alone, of knowing that even the way you adjust your pillow is being analyzed for political meaning. The weight of destiny here is not found in grand speeches or battles, but in this tiny, suffocating loss of the self. You can almost feel the tightness of the stiffened silk bodice and the incredible weight of the towering, powdered coiffure, a physical manifestation of a life that has become a gilded cage, where the bars are made of tradition and the locks are carved from solid gold. And here is the quiet, chilling reveal of the golden trap. Versailles was a world where even the simple act of putting on a shirt was a profound political statement. In this palace, proximity was power. The right to stand nearest to the queen as she dressed was a prize. Men and women spent their entire lives and fortunes to settle. A sleeve handed by the wrong person could start a feud between noble houses that lasted for generations. Every ribbon, every button, every drop of perfume was a move on a chessboard. Marie Antoinette was not just a girl wearing clothes. She was a living flag, a territory to be occupied by the various factions of the court. Her very skin was a political boundary. She was immersed in a sea of luxury oceans of the finest champagne, mountains of truffles, and forests of the softest velvet, yet she was starving for a single second of genuine, unscripted human connection. She was the most photographed and painted woman of her age, yet no one was actually looking at her. They were only looking at the rank she represented. As the deep evening finally settles over the limestone walls of the palace, let the sounds of Versailles become your hypnotic lullaby. Listen to the distant, rhythmic splashing of the Apollo fountain in the gardens, a constant liquid pulse that underscores the silence of the night. Imagine the sound of 100 violins playing a slow, stately minuet in a distant ballroom, the melody muffled and softened by thick stone walls and heavy, dust-covered velvet curtains. The sound is repetitive, elegant, and deeply rhythmic, a cadence of absolute order and control. Listen for the gentle, crystal-like clinking of the great chandeliers as they sway slightly in the evening draught, a sound like 1,000 tiny bells ringing in the dark. These sounds are low, steady, and profound, pulling you away from the frantic, judging energy of the day and into a state of heavy, dreamlike stillness. The first years in this golden trap were a slow, invisible erosion of the girl she had once been in the forests of Austria. The Antonia who laughed loudly and moved with a child's grace was being slowly, methodically replaced by the polished porcelain mask of the French Dauphine. You can feel the transition in the very air, the shift from the crisp, open freedom of the mountains to the heavy, perfumed, and stagnant atmosphere of the court. The palace is a labyrinth of mirrors where it is far too easy to lose your way, and even easier to lose your soul. As we drift together through the silent, moonlit halls, imagine the millions of candles that have burned down to nothing in these rooms over the centuries. Each one a life spent in the quiet, desperate service of a fading dream. The gold is beautiful to the eye, but it is cold to the touch. The silk is soft against the skin, but it is thin against the wind. The trap has closed, and the girl is inside, waiting for a key that may never truly exist. The silence of the palace at night is not a peaceful silence. It is a heavy, expectant one, thick with the weight of 1,000 years of kings. It is the silence of a grand theater after the final play has ended, but before the flickering lights are fully put out. Through the tall arched windows, the gardens stretch out in the silver moonlight, a world of perfect frozen geometry and long hidden shadows. The transition from the day's exhausting performance to the night's isolation is nearly complete. The heavy weight of the crown she will one day wear sits silently on the marble nightstand, a promise of more gold, more eyes, and more traps to come. The journey into the heart of Versailles has only just begun to unfold, and the air is thick with the scent of white lilies and the cold, unmoving breath of history itself. Breathe in the scent of the palace one last time, the mixture of expensive cedar wood, old, damp stone, and the faint, lingering perfume of 1,000 departed courtiers. Feel the profound stillness of the room as the moonlight crawls slowly across the parquet floor, illuminating the intricate golden carvings on the high walls. We are moving now, leaving the public, glittering halls behind and drifting deeper into the private, lonely spaces of her heart. The world outside the great iron gates is far away, a forgotten memory of dust, wind, and hunger. Inside, there's only the gold, the mirrors, and the endless rhythmic ticking of the clocks. Let the steady, ancient pulse of the palace lull you into a deeper, more profound rest. Trap is beautiful. The night is long, and for now, the queen is safe in her golden cage, dreaming of a mountain forest she can no longer reach, while the mirrors watch her sleep. As the last candle in the hallway flickers and dies, notice the silence that remains. It is a heavy velvet cloak that covers the gold and the marble alike. The rustle of silk has faded into the shadows, and the clinking of the crystal chandeliers has settled into a quiet hum. The transition is complete. The girl who was Antonia is gone, and the woman who is France is all that remains. But even here, in the heart of the trap, there is a small, quiet space where she can breathe. Imagine her lying in the dark, the gold leaf on the walls glowing faintly in the moonlight, as she listens to the rhythmic breathing of the palace. It is a slow, steady sound, like the turning of a great golden wheel. Let that rhythm guide you too as you drift further away from the light and into the soft, welcoming shadows of the past. The story continues, but for now, there is only the peace of the silent mirrors and the warmth of the heavy, silken blankets. The night watchman makes his rounds, his footsteps a slow, steady beat on the cobblestones far below the window. Each step is a reminder that time is moving, even here, in this frozen world of gold. But time in Versailles moves differently. It is slower, heavier, more deliberate. Let your mind sync with that slow imperial clock. There is no rush, no urgency, only the long, slow arc of history. The hall of mirrors is empty now, the 3,000 candles reduced to small pools of wax, the reflections of the gods on the ceiling hidden in the dark. The only thing that remains is the stillness, a deep and restorative quiet that reaches into the very corners of the room. You are safe in this silence, protected by the stone walls and the weight of the centuries. The world is at rest, and so are you, drifting on a golden tide toward the softest of dreams. The journey through the palace is almost over for tonight. The doors are locked, the guards are at their posts, and the fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers. The air is cool and still, a perfect sanctuary for sleep. As you close your eyes, imagine the vast gardens of Versailles under the stars. The statues standing silent guard over the fountains, the water reflecting the distant constellations. This is the peace of the golden trap, a beauty, so absolute it becomes a kind of rest. Let the image of the golden gates fade into the dark, replaced by the soft, rhythmic sound of the wind in the trees. You are traveling now, not through halls of stone, but through the landscape of the soul, toward a place where the gold is only a memory and the night is full of fire. Stars. The story of the queen is waiting for tomorrow, but tonight there is only thou, quiet, and the dreams, and the deep, golden sleep of Versailles. The golden, shimmering gates of Versailles may have gleamed with the magnificent promise of a sun-drenched fairy tale, but inside the private royal apartments, the air was often heavy with a cold, echoing, and persistent silence. Imagine the long, dim corridors of the palace at midnight, where the only sound is the soft, rhythmic, muffled footsteps of a lone guard, and the distant, haunting howl of the wind through the perfectly manicured groves of the gardens outside. For Marie Antoinette, the grandest and most private tragedy of her early years was played out not on a distant battlefield, but within the silent, silk-draped confines of a royal bedchamber. 7 years, for 7 long, agonizing and quiet years. The marriage that was meant to secure the fragile future of 2 world empires remained completely unconsummated. In a world where a queen's only true currency and purpose was her fertility, the silence was more than a private disappointment. It was a public shaming that grew louder and more piercing with every passing season. Imagine the young Dauphine lying perfectly awake in the deep dark, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight to shut out the world, listening to the slow, steady, and rhythmic breathing of the boy lying beside her, a husband who was still a stranger, and a stranger who held the absolute key to her survival. The body of this long, silent period was defined by a cruel and relentless public ridicule that seeped through the thick palace walls like a slow-moving, invisible poison. Versailles was a place that fed on the smallest scrap of gossip, and the private bedroom of the royal couple was the most scrutinized and judged stage in the entire kingdom. Every single morning after the exhausting ritual of the waking, the courtiers would whisper behind their intricate lace fans, searching the young queen's pale face for a sign of a physical change that never came. The underground pamphlets in Paris grew sharper and more vicious, mocking the king's perceived weakness and the queen's apparent failure to produce the required heir. Imagine the crushing, constant weight of that collective gaze, thousands of eyes watching for a pregnancy, thousands of voices questioning her very worth as a woman and a ruler. Her husband, Louis XVI, was a man of painful, paralyzing social awkwardness, a quiet soul who preferred the solitary mechanical precision of a locksmith's forge to the performative glamour of the court. When he should have been a partner, he was a ghost. When he should have been a king, he was merely a boy hiding in the deep shadows of his own magnificent palace. This prolonged silence developed an internal conflict within her that was both deep and painfully quiet. She was a woman trapped between 2 impossible, clashing expectations: the loud demand to be a mother to a restless nation, and the cold reality of being a wife to a man who could not even look her in the eye. The melancholy of these early years was not a sharp, sudden pain, but a slow, rhythmic, and heavy ache. Picture her sitting alone by the tall window in the late afternoon, the light turning a pale, dusty gold over the gardens, as she watched other women laughing with their children in the distance. The profound empathy we feel for her comes from this universal human experience of being utterly lonely in a crowded room, of being unloved in a place designed for supposed romance. She was the center of the most magnificent court in the world. Yet she lived in a vast desert of human affection. The repetitive nature of this struggle, the waking, the judging eyes, the silent nights, and the waking again created a loop of emotional exhaustion that threatened to permanently dim the very light of her spirit. And here is the quiet, soft reveal that history so often obscures with its loud focus on scandal and excess. Louis XVI was not a cruel man, nor was he indifferent to his young wife's growing plight. The truth was much more human and infinitely more tragic. He was a man utterly terrified of his own shadow, paralyzed by a crushing sense of inadequacy and a physical condition that made the very idea of intimacy a source of deep, secret shame. He did not withhold his affection out of malice or spite. He withheld it out of a profound, stuttering fear of failing the impossible role he had been born to play. He looked at Marie Antoinette and saw not just a beautiful, vibrant woman, but the living embodiment of the terrifying responsibility he was not yet ready to shoulder. They were two children, cast into the roles of giants, reaching for each other in the dark, but constantly, tragically missing the mark. Their silent marriage was a collision of two different types of loneliness, a long tragedy of missed connections and unspoken words that lasted for nearly a decade. As the palace falls into its deepest, most profound slumber, let the sounds of the king's private mechanical obsession become your hypnotic lullaby. In the small, cramped rooms above the grand royal bedchamber, Louis kept a vast and incredible collection of clocks, hundreds of them, made of gold, silver, and the finest dark woods. Listen to the sound of them now in the stillness of the night. 1,000 tiny rhythmic heartbeats ticking in the dark. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound is steady, repetitive, and strangely, deeply hypnotic. It is a cadence of mechanical perfection in a world of human chaos and broken promises. Imagine the soft, metallic whir of the tiny gears as they turn, the delicate, crystal-like clink of the chimes as they mark the passing of another hour of silence. This sound, the relentless ticking of the king's clocks, is the invisible soundtrack of her isolation. It is a rhythmic pulse that pulls you deeper and deeper into the stillness of the night, a steady vibration that tells the story of time passing without change, of seconds turning into years, all within the safe, hushed confines of these ancient stone walls. The air in the bedchamber grows stagnant and heavy with the weight of all the things left unsaid between them. The silk sheets are cool, smooth, and unmoving against the skin. You can feel the transition happening slowly within her soul. A slow, deliberate turning away from the hope of a traditional domestic life toward something else, something louder, brighter, and faster. The silence of the marriage was becoming an unbearable weight, and the slow story of her domestic failure was finally reaching a breaking point. She could no longer stay still in the ticking, hollow quiet of the king's rooms. The melancholy was beginning to sharpen into a desperate need for escape, a hunger to drown out the rhythmic sound of the clocks with the chaotic sound of music, the laughter of friends, and the frantic rustle of playing cards. The transition begins with a single cautious step toward the door. As the king's breathing remains steady, slow, and oblivious, Marie Antoinette rises from the heavy bed, her movements as quiet and fluid as a shadow on the wall. She is leaving the safe but suffocating silence of her marriage behind for a few precious hours of darkness. The path leads away from the heavy damask curtains and toward the hidden, narrow staircases that lead to the secret world of the night. She is trading the ticking of the clocks for the wild rhythm of the dance, seeking a different kind of immersion to numb the constant, hollow ache of her empty arms. The internal conflict has finally found its vent. The woman who was denied a private, intimate life would now create a secret, public one, a world of midnight balls and masked faces where she could pretend, if only for a brief moment, that she was not a failing queen, but simply a girl who was free to be seen and desired. Breathe in the cool, perfectly still air of the palace at midnight. Feel the profound, ancient weight of the silence that has defined her first 7 years in this foreign land. The clocks continue to tick in the rooms above, their silver pendulums swinging in perfect, unceasing, and indifferent time. But she is no longer listening to their judgment. We are moving with her now, drifting away from the silent bedchamber and into the deep velvet shadows of the Versailles night. The transition is soft, a slow, melodic fading of the king's mechanical heartbeat into the distant, pulsing rhythm of a solitary violin playing in the gardens. The story is shifting its weight, the loop is finally breaking, and the escape into the glitter of the night has begun in earnest. Let the steady, hypnotic tick-tock of the clocks carry you further and further into rest, even as we follow the queen toward the flickering, uncertain lights of her quiet rebellion. The world of the night is a mirror image of the day, but it is softer, blurred at the edges, and filled with the beautiful promise of anonymity. As she glides through the dark, echoing galleries, her long silk cloak trailing behind her like a ghost of the life she is leaving, notice how the very nature of the silence changes. It is no longer a heavy, judging silence, but a protective, secretive one. The melancholy is still there, tucked neatly into the folds of her dress, but it is being carried toward a place of temporary, sweet forgetting. You are drifting with her now, floating on a vast sea of shadows, moving away from the crushing pressure of the throne and toward the fragile, fleeting peace of the masquerade. The marriage remains silent, the air remains a distant dream, but the night is long, and the music is just beginning to rise from the dark. Close your eyes and hear the last, lingering chime of the great clock in the marble courtyard. It is a deep, resonant, and mournful sound that vibrates through the heavy floorboards and settles deep in your chest. Bong, bong, bong. It is the sound of an entire era passing, of a girl finally growing up in the dark, and of a human heart seeking its own desperate rhythm. Let that deep ancient vibration ground you, pulling you into a state of absolute, heavy, and restorative stillness. The journey through the silent ticking halls is over for tonight. The queen has found her escape in the shadows, and you have found your absolute rest in the silence. The story of the silent marriage is a story of infinite patience and quiet pain. But tonight, for you, it is simply a long, slow lullaby of ticking gold and silver, guiding you toward the softest of dreams in the very heart of the sleeping palace. Imagine the dust motes dancing in the moonlight of the empty ballroom as she enters. The air is cooler here, smelling of floor wax and the ghost of perfumes past. This is the space where she breathes. The conflict between who she is and who she must be dissolves in the dark. There are no spies here, no mothers-in-law, no counting of days since the wedding. There is only the rhythm of the night. Let your breathing match that rhythm, slow, deep, and effortless. You are safe in the shadows of history, protected by the distance of time. The silence is no longer an enemy, it is a companion. As the queen finds her solace in the music of the night, you find yours in the music of the silence. The king's clocks are far away now, their ticking reduced to a faint, distant hum like the sound of a summer insect. The heavy weight of the Versailles sun is gone, replaced by the cool silver touch of the moon. This is the loop of her life, from the silent room to the vibrant night, and back again. But for now, we stay in the transition, in that beautiful, quiet moment between the tick and the tock, where everything is possible and nothing is required. Sleep now, as the queen dances in the dark, and the clocks mark the hours of Maya, a world that is slowly, quietly, drifting away into the mist of legend. The silent, ticking chambers of the king's private apartments are left far behind, as we descend the hidden, narrow stone staircases that lead into the vibrant, secret, and flickering pulse of the Versailles night. Here, in the belly of the palace, the air is no longer stagnant with the heavy weight of unsaid words, or the cold clinical silence of a failing marriage. Instead, it is charged with a manic, rhythmic energy, scented deeply with the musk of 1,000 different perfumes. The sweet, cloying rot of overripe exotic fruit, and the sharp, ozone smell of lightning just before a summer storm. Imagine stepping into the grand ballroom of the opera or the private illicit gambling salons of the high nobility, where the candlelight does not merely glow, it dances and leaps, refracted through the thousands of crystal prisms of massive chandeliers that sway slowly with the collective movement of the crowd. This is the world of the masked ball, a surreal landscape of escapism and false joy, where identity is a fluid, shimmering, and disposable thing. Beneath the heavy velvet masks, the rigid, suffocating hierarchy of the day dissolves into a vast sea of anonymous, moving shadows. For Marie Antoinette, these feverish nights are a desperate sanctuary, a place where she can finally shed the heavy judging skin of a failing queen and become, for a few hours of darkness, a ghost of pure motion, music, and light. The body of this nocturnal life is defined by a frantic, repetitive, and almost hypnotic pursuit of total distraction. Picture the long gambling tables, where piles of gold louis d'or glint and shimmer under the low-hanging silk lamps, and the air is thick with the constant frantic rustle of playing cards and the low, urgent and rhythmic murmurs of the high-stakes players. It is here, in these smoke-filled rooms, that the dark myth of Madame Deficit begins to take its first roots in the dry soil of public resentment. While the common people of France struggle beneath the weight of poor harvests and the rising price of a single loaf of bread, the Queen is seen at the very center of a glittering whirlwind of excess. Her obsession with fashion becomes a silent, expensive language of rebellion against her own internal unhappiness. Imagine the sheer, gravity-defying spectacle of her poufs, those towering, powdered hairstyles that reached 3 feet into the air, adorned with miniature sailing ships made of glass, mechanical birds that chirped, and fresh flowers kept alive in tiny vials of water hidden deep within the hair. Each new silk gown, each yard of lace from the exclusive shops of Rose Bertin, and each diamond-encrusted fan is a heavy brick in the wall she is building between herself and her profound loneliness. To the outside world, this is pure arrogance. To the woman living inside the silk, it is a desperate survival mechanism, a way to occupy a restless mind that has no child to hold and no husband to speak to in the dark. This creates a very specific, haunting vibe of the 18th century, a world of extreme, fragile beauty built upon a foundation of profound instability. It is a slow-motion carousel of pleasure that spins and spins but never quite reaches the heart of the rider. The internal conflict we have been following now manifests as an outward explosion of color, fabric, and sound. The retention of this story lies in the deep understanding that this was not a simple act of greed, but a psychological drowning in the shallow end of the pool. She was immersing herself in the superficial because the deep, dark waters of her actual life were simply too cold to swim in. The laughter at the masked balls is loud and melodic, echoing off the marble. But if you listen very closely, it has a hollow, brittle edge to it, like the sound of fine glass that is just about to shatter under the pressure. She is surrounded by a tight circle of favorites, a petit comité of friends who provide the shallow warmth that the king cannot. But their loyalty is often bought with the very gold that is draining the national treasury and eroding her royal reputation. She is dancing on the razor's edge of a precipice, but the music is so hauntingly beautiful that she chooses, moment by moment, not to look down at the abyss. And here is the soft, melancholic reveal of her long nocturnal rebellion. Marie Antoinette did not spend money because she loved wealth for wealth's sake. She spent it to fill the vast, aching, and hollow void left by an empty marriage and a cold, judgmental court that never truly welcomed her. Every diamond she purchased was a hard, glittering substitute for a kiss. Every midnight ball was a loud distraction from the silent, ticking bedchamber she had fled. The extravagance was a desperate form of self-medication, a way to numb the stinging, daily rejection of a husband who remained a ghost in his own home. She was trying to buy the feeling of being alive, purchasing fleeting moments of false joy to mask a permanent, underlying sorrow. The Madame Deficit that the world learned to hate was merely a mask worn by a frightened girl who was simply trying to outrun her own shadow. She poured gold into the emptiness of her life, hoping against hope that if she made the surface glitter brightly enough, no one, not even herself, would notice the deep darkness gathering beneath the floorboards. As the frantic, nervous energy of the gambling salon begins to settle into a deep, late-night rhythm, let the repetitive sounds of the night become your own hypnotic lullaby. In the far corner of the room, the heavy mahogany roulette wheel spins with a repetitive, soothing, and metallic whir. Whir-clack, whir-clack. Listen to the sound of the small ivory ball as it dances and leaps against the spinning wood, a rhythmic clicking cadence that feels like the very heartbeat of the night itself. It is a sound of pure, mindless chance, a steady vibration that pulls your tired mind away from the worries of the world. Imagine the soft, rhythmic shuffling of the cards, a gentle, paper-like sigh that repeats over and over in the hands of the dealer. Shh, clack, shh, clack. These sounds are the pulse of her escape from reality. The clinking of the gold coins is no longer a symbol of national debt, but a metallic melody, a gentle silver chime that marks the slow passing of the hours. Let the steady, circular motion of the wheel guide your breathing slow, deep, and effortless as the glitter of the ballroom begins to blur into a soft focus, golden dream. The air in the salon grows warm, hazy, and thick with the white smoke of 100 flickering candles. You can feel the transition beginning to take shape within her, a quiet, heavy exhaustion that inevitably follows the manic, artificial high of the night. The false joy is slowly fading, leaving behind a deep craving for something more substantial, something much quieter and more real. The slow story of her rebellion is finally reaching its natural limit. The masks are starting to feel heavy and suffocating against the skin. The white powder in her hair feels like dry dust, and the forced laughter of her friends begins to sound like nothing more than meaningless noise. She's realizing, in the stillness of the late hour, that the night cannot hide her forever, and the gold cannot buy the peace she truly seeks in the center of her soul. The transition is moving away from the crowded, judging salons and toward a vision of a different kind of sanctuary, a place where the rules of Versailles do not apply, and where she can finally be alone with the trees and the earth. The path forward leads away from the cold marble and the judging mirrors, toward the dark, quiet, and ancient reaches of the palace park. As the last bets are placed, and the candles burn low in their silver sockets, Marie Antoinette looks toward the dark window. The dawn is still several hours away, but the rebellion of the night has served its temporary purpose. It has provided the numbing distraction she needed to survive another day of silence and another week of scrutiny. Now, she seeks a simpler, more honest peace, a quietude that does not require a velvet mask or a stolen diamond. The transition is soft and fluid, a slow fading of the violin's frantic strings into the rhythmic rustle of the leaves in the wind outside. We are leaving the gambling tables and the piles of gold behind, moving through the cooling night air toward the Petit Trianon, her own private world of flowers, simple cotton, and damp earth. The internal conflict is shifting from a desperate need for noise to a deep, visceral hunger for simplicity. Breathe in the cooling scent of the night, the fading musk of perfume, the smell of cooling wax, and the first hints of damp, fresh grass from the sprawling gardens outside. Feel the profound weight of the night as it wraps around the palace like a velvet blanket, hiding the scars and the dramas of the day. The roulette wheel has finally stopped its spinning. The small ivory ball has found its resting place, and the cards are dealt for the final time this evening. We are moving with her now, drifting through the dark, echoing galleries, away from the golden trap, and toward the soft green silence of her private retreat. The transition is as gentle as a long-held sigh, a slow movement from the artificial, flickering light of the ballroom to the natural, steady light of the moon. Let the steady, rhythmic sound of her footsteps on the cold stone floor lull you into a state of absolute, heavy, and restorative stillness. The journey through the night rebellion is coming to a close. The music is now just a distant memory, a faint, lingering vibration in the cool air. The world is at its very quietest, the hour when dreams are deepest, and the past feels closest to the touch. The queen is seeking a home within her own palace, a place where she does not have to be a symbol, a bargain, or a disappointment. As she walks toward the sanctuary of the Trianon, imagine the long shadows of the trees reaching out to greet her, offering a protection that the gold and the diamonds never could. You are safe in this transition, protected by the silence and the crisp night air. The rebellion is over for tonight, and the search for a true quiet peace has finally begun. Close your eyes and hear the soft, rhythmic sound of the wind in the tall elms and ancient oaks of Versailles. It is a deep, resonant sound, like the very breathing of the earth itself as it sleeps. Shh, shh. It is the sound of an entire era trying to find its rest, of a woman trying to find her lost soul in the dark. Let that natural, steady rhythm ground you, pulling you into a state of absolute, heavy, and restorative stillness. The journey through the gambling halls is over. The queen has found her secret path to the gardens, and you have found your own path to a deep and dreamless sleep. The story of the Night Rebellion is a story of a search for joy in a world of profound sorrow. But tonight, for you, it is simply a long, slow, and beautiful lullaby of spinning wood and rustling leaves, guiding you toward the softest of dreams in the quietest, darkest corner of the kingdom. The stars above the Trianon are bright, cold, and steady, far removed from the flickering, frantic, and dying light of the palace candles. Let your mind drift slowly toward those stars, toward the infinite, cool dark of the night sky. There is no debt there, no ridicule, no Madame Deficit, and no weight of the crown. There is only the vast, silent, and eternal peace of the universe. You are traveling now, not through halls of silk and mirrors, but through the landscape of a quiet, resting heart, toward a place where the world is simple and the night is full of grace. The story of the queen continues in the morning, but for now, in this moment, there is only the quiet, and the stars, and the deep, golden and restorative sleep of the gardens of France, away from the suffocating, heavy gold leaf of the main palace. Deep within the verdant, untamed, and whispering edges of the royal park, there lies a hidden, winding path, where the very air begins to breathe with a different, slower rhythm. This is the crossing into the Petit Trianon, a modest, pale limestone sanctuary gifted to a young queen who felt she was drowning in the vast, glittering sea of Versailles. Imagine the heavy, ornate iron gates of the court swinging shut behind you with a distant, final click, replaced instantly by the soft, welcoming rustle of willow branches and the sweet, grounding scent of wild lavender and damp earth. Here, the world of the Golden Trap dissolves into a soft focus landscape of ultimate peace and profound isolation. The horizon is no longer defined by symmetrical marble statues or forced fountains. It is defined by the gentle, natural curve of a grassy hill and the unpredictable, sprawling reach of an ancient oak tree. In the small house in the woods, the rigid white-powdered mask of the Queen of France is laid aside on a simple, scrubbed wooden table. Marie Antoinette is no longer a political bargain, a failing wife, or a symbol of the state. She is simply a woman seeking the quiet, honest, and healing touch of the cool earth. This sanctuary was her private kingdom of the soul, a place where the sun felt warmer on her skin because it was not filtered through 17 enormous mirrors or the cold eyes of courtiers. The heart of this life is found in the Hameau de la Reine, her miniature, rustic village where the complex architecture of power was replaced by the simple, humble architecture of the heart. Picture a collection of small, charming, thatched roof cottages nestled peacefully around a clear, slowly winding stream. There is a stone mill with a turning wooden wheel, a dairy with cool shaded stone floors, and a farmhouse where the walls are draped in thick, climbing jasmine and fragrant roses. Imagine the queen waking up not to a room full of staring noblewomen and rigid protocol, but to the soft, rhythmic lowing of cows in the distance and the silent morning mist rising like a ghost from the surface of the pond. Here, she spent her long, golden days in the simplest of human tasks, milking her favorite gentle cows into white porcelain bowls, gathering warm, speckled eggs from the soft straw, and picking sun-ripened strawberries while wearing a plain, breathable white muslin dress. There was no whalebone corset to restrict her breath, no towering, heavy powdered wig to weigh down her weary head. She was immersing herself in a dream of rural innocence, a deliberate sleep anchor designed to pull her restless soul back from the very brink of exhaustion. The vibe of the Trianon is one of profound, hushed, and absolute simplicity. It is a world where time is measured not by the relentless ticking of the king's gold clocks, but by the slow, natural movement of shadows across the long grass. The internal conflict that had plagued her in the cold corridors of Versailles, the impossible need to be both a mother to a restless nation and a wife to a ghost, finds a temporary, beautiful truce here. In the secret gardens of the Trianon, she was finally the mother she had always desired to be, playing with her children in the dirt without an audience, teaching them the humble names of the wildflowers, and breathing in the honest, uncomplicated scent of the living soil. This was her safe space, a psychological fortress built of climbing roses and simple thatch. The repetitive, gentle actions of farm life, the steady pouring of milk, the rhythmic clipping of hedges, the soft scattering of grain for the chickens, provided a rhythmic stability that the chaotic, noisy gambling tables of the night never could. It was a loop of peace, a deliberate and necessary return to the sensory joys of her lost Austrian childhood, far removed from the judging, jealous eyes of the French court. Yet, even in this hidden Garden of Eden, a silent and invisible storm was slowly gathering. The very act of seeking her own basic humanity became her most dangerous and unforgivable transgression in the eyes of the world. In her desperate, private attempt to be a human being, she deeply and permanently offended the high nobility of France, who did not want a woman for a queen. They wanted a god, an idol, a statue of unmoving gold. By retreating to her private village and closing the heavy doors to the traditional aristocracy, she inadvertently broke the ancient, unwritten contract of the absolute monarchy. The courtiers who had spent their entire lives seeking her favor felt cast out into the cold, replaced in her heart by a small circle of simple friends and the quiet, undemanding company of nature. They viewed her simple muslin dresses not as a sign of humility or grace, but as a direct insult to the majesty and tradition of the throne. To the world outside the high garden walls, her pursuit of ultimate peace looked like a cold, elitist withdrawal from her duties. Ba wanted to be a person, but the world demanded she be a monument. This was the tragic, silent paradox of the Trianon. The more she found her true self, the more she lost her people and her crown. As the late afternoon sun begins to dip low behind the elms, casting long, amber, and honeyed fingers across the hameau, let the natural, steady sounds of the sanctuary become your final, most restorative lullaby. Listen to the gentle, hypnotic, and constant gurgle of the stream as it flows over smooth, ancient river, stones a liquid, melodic sound that repeats in a never-ending cycle of absolute peace. Babble, ripple, sigh, it is the sound of water that belongs only to itself, answering to no king and no law. In the distance, hear the muffled, rhythmic thud of a cow's heavy hoof on the soft, damp earth, and the occasional sleepy chirp of a small bird settling into the straw eaves of the mill. These are the sounds of a world at rest, a cadence of life that is far older than kings, and much deeper than the shifting sands of politics. The soft rustle of the wind through the tall, dry grass is a steady, sweeping sound, like the slow, deep breath of the earth itself as it prepares for sleep. Let these rhythmic, natural sounds ground you, pulling your tired mind away from the golden trap and into the cool, green, and silent embrace of the woods. The air in the Trianon is cool, sweet, and still, smelling of damp green moss, blooming honeysuckle, and the faint scent of wood smoke from a cottage chimney. You can feel the transition beginning to stir at the very edge of the park, a low, distant, and ominous vibration that threatens to break the fragile spell of the garden. For now, however, the queen remains in her sanctuary, her hands stained with the sweet red juice of the strawberries, her heart quiet and still for the first time in many years. But the slow story of her peace is drawing to a natural close. The outside world is starting to scream a low, discordant and hungry sound of anger that is rising from the crowded, desperate streets of Paris, far beyond the iron gates and the manicured lawns. The return to safe was a beautiful, necessary illusion, a fragile bubble of porcelain, muslin, and lace that could not possibly withstand the mounting pressure of a rapidly changing world. The peace of the Trianon was a temporary forgetting, a final golden and sun-drenched afternoon before the long, terrifying, and dark night of the Revolution began to fall. The transition from the safety of the garden back to the cold reality of history is sharp and sudden, like a cold winter wind blowing off the river. As the sun finally disappears behind the dark line of the trees, the shadows in the hameau grow long, distorted, and strange. The emotional goal of isolation is being replaced by the terrifying, looming reality of being trapped by the very walls she built for her protection. The iron gates that once kept the annoying courtiers out are now the only things keeping the angry world from rushing in to take her. Marie Antoinette stands at the very edge of her quiet pond, watching the surface of the water turn dark, opaque, and cold. The internal conflict is no longer about her marriage, her fashion, or her reputation. It is now entirely about survival and the protection of her children. The vibe of the night is changing rapidly from the escape of the masked ball to the inevitable, violent confrontation of the mob. The story is moving away from the safe and the quiet, drifting toward the heat and the lightning of the storm. Breathe in the cool, darkening air of the woods one last time, letting the scent of the trees fill your mind. Feel the profound, heavy stillness of the small limestone house as the lamps are lit, their soft yellow light flickering gently against the simple, unadorned wooden walls. The stream continues to flow in its endless circle, and the farm animals continue to sleep in their warm straw. But the queen is already looking toward the dark horizon with eyes that have seen the end of an era. We are moving with her now, leaving the sanctuary of the Petit Trianon behind forever, drifting slowly back toward the great, cold, and echoing stone of the main palace of Versailles. The transition is inevitable, a slow, heavy pulling of the human soul back into the grinding, indifferent machinery of history. Let the steady, hypnotic rhythm of the turning water wheel carry you into a state of absolute, heavy, and dreamless rest, even as the world outside the gates begins to boil with fury. The journey through the secret sanctuary is over. The white muslin dress is folded away for the last time, and the heavy, formal silk of the Queen of France is being brought out once more by trembling hands. The peace of the rustic village was a gift, a brief moment of ultimate isolation that allowed her to remember who she was as a person before the world told her who she had to be as a symbol. As you close your eyes, imagine the Hameau de la Reine under the first cold stars of the evening, silent, beautiful, and haunting in its sudden abandonment. This is the sleep anchor, the memory of a place where the gold was gone, the mirrors were broken, and the heart was allowed to be full and quiet. You are safe in this memory, protected by the great distance of the years and the deep silence of the woods. The world may scream, and the fires may rise, but here, in the very heart of this story, there is only the rhythmic sound of the stream and the deep, restorative sleep of the garden. The final low chime of the day sounds from the distant, dark palace, a low bronze note that carries across the park like a warning. It is the end of the dream, the end of the golden afternoon. The transition to the revolution is beginning to take its first heavy steps, but for tonight, you remain safely in the garden. Let the image of the thatched cottages and the white cows fade into the dark, replaced by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the ancient forest. You are traveling now, not through the blood and the fire of history, but through the calm landscape of a quiet, resting soul, toward a place where the world is simple and the night is full of grace and silence. The story of the Queen continues in the shadows, but for now, in this space, there is only the quiet, and the stars, and the deep, golden and eternal sleep of the Petit Trianon. The water of the pond is as still as a mirror, reflecting the vast, uncaring sky above. No ripples disturb the surface, no wind moves the reeds. It is a perfect, frozen moment of peace before the world changes forever. Let your mind become like that water, still, deep, and reflective. There is no more work to be done, no more roles to play, no more expectations to meet. The Queen is at rest, and so are you. The garden is a sanctuary that exists beyond time, a place where you can always return when the world becomes too loud. Sleep now, as the mist covers the hameau, and the only sound left is the heartbeat of the earth, steady and slow, guiding you into the softest of dreams. The stars are your witnesses now, watching over the silent cottages and the sleeping trees. They have seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth of queens and the death of kings, and yet they remain unchanged, calm, and bright. Let their light fill your vision, a cool, silver glow that washes away the heat and the noise of the day. You are part of that light, part of that silence, part of the eternal rhythm of the night. The journey is complete, the safe harbor has been reached, and the story has found its quietest point. Sleep, deep and long, in the embrace of the Petit Trianon, as the world of the sun fades away into the beautiful, endless dark of the stars. The soft pastoral dream of the Petit Trianon is shattered not by the roar of a cannon, but by the cold, calculated click of a gemstone against a jeweler's loop. We are pulled back from the scent of strawberries into the dark, rain-slicked alleys of Paris and the shadowy corners of the Versailles gardens at midnight. This is the beginning of the end, a moment of profound disillusionment where the shimmering veil of royalty is torn away to reveal the rot of scandal beneath. Imagine the most expensive necklace in the world, a staggering, heavy collar of 547 diamonds, so massive it looks like a frozen waterfall of light. It was a piece of jewelry intended for a king's mistress, so costly that no treasury in Europe could afford it without trembling. Now, picture this necklace hanging in the balance of a grand deception, a plot twist of history that would do more to destroy the Queen's reputation than 1,000 political pamphlets ever could. The opening of this dark chapter takes place in the Grove of Venus, a secluded, wooded corner of the palace grounds where the moonlight barely touches the forest floor. In the deep shadows of a summer night, a cardinal of the church, a man blinded by his desperate ambition to regain the Queen's favor, meets a woman he believes is Marie Antoinette. The woman is veiled, her voice a mere whisper, her movements graceful and regal. She hands him a single rose and a promise of forgiveness. But the immerse stage of this tragedy reveals the bitter truth. The woman in the shadows is a common prostitute hired for her likeness, and the architect of the meeting is a brilliant con artist named Jean de la Motte. This was a world of masks more dangerous than any ballroom, where a cardinal could be fooled into acting as a middleman for a purchase the Queen never authorized. The air in the grove is cold, damp, and thick with the scent of pine and betrayal, a sensory overload of tension that marks the death of innocence. The body of this scandal is the theft of the necklace itself, a slow-motion heist conducted in the name of a queen who was completely oblivious to its existence. Imagine the con artists taking the diamonds, prying them from their heavy gold settings with common kitchen knives, and scattering them across the black markets of London and Paris. As the jewelers waited for a payment that would never come, the whispers began to grow into a deafening roar. In the public mind, Marie Antoinette was no longer the mother of the people, or even Madame Deficit. She was now a thief, a woman who would bankrupt a starving nation to satisfy a carnal lust for glitter. The disillusionment was absolute, the people of France. Already suffering from a winter so cold, the rivers froze solid, looked toward the palace and saw not a protector, but a monster adorned in stolen light. The sheer scale of the lie was so vast that the truth had no room to breathe. And here is the sharp, heartbreaking reveal of the diamond necklace affair. Marie Antoinette was entirely innocent. She had never met the cardinal in the grove. She had never set eyes on the necklace. She had even turned down the purchase years earlier, saying that France needed more ships and fewer diamonds. But when the scandal broke and the trial commenced, the people refused to believe her. They wanted her to be guilty. They needed her to be the villain of their story, so that their own suffering would have a face and a name. The acquittal of the cardinal and the public lashing of the con artist only served to deepen the hatred for the queen. In the eyes of the public, she was the one who had escaped justice. She was the one who remained in her golden cage while the world burned. The intellectual engagement of this moment is the realization that in politics, perception is more powerful than any fact, and a well-told lie can topple a throne more effectively than 1,000 swords. As the weight of this public rejection settles over the queen's heart, let the cold, hard glitter of the diamonds become your lullaby. Imagine a handful of loose diamonds scattered across a black velvet cloth under the pale, indifferent light of the moon. Listen to the sound they make, a sharp, crystalline clink as they touch one another, a repetitive and rhythmic sound of frozen light. Clink, clink. It is a sound that is beautiful but devoid of warmth, like a winter star. The light reflecting off the facets is sharp and piercing, a rhythmic pulse of silver and blue that dances behind your closed eyelids. Imagine the coldness of the stones against your skin, a sensation of absolute, unyielding hardness. This is the cadence of the new world, a world of ice and stone, where the softness of the Trianon has been replaced by the jagged edges of a diamond. Let the rhythmic clink of the stones pull you deeper into a state of heavy, chilled rest, away from the heat of the crowds and into the cold silence of the jewels. The air in the palace is changing now. It is no longer perfumed with roses, but sharp with the smell of scorched paper and the metallic tang of cold iron. You can feel the transition beginning to hum in the distance, a low, rhythmic thumping that sounds like 1,000 hearts beating as one. The slow story of the diamond necklace has reached its conclusion, and the reveal has left the queen more isolated than ever before. The internal conflict has shifted from personal loneliness to a terrifying, existential dread. The diamonds have been sold, the con artists have fled, but the damage is permanent. The crown is no longer a symbol of divine right, it is a target. The vibe of the night is shifting from the quiet of the grove to the restless, hungry energy of the Paris streets. The transition is marked by a new sound rising from the horizon, the sound of the bread riots. It begins as a low, distant murmur, like the sound of a rising tide against a stone wall. It is the sound of thousands of empty stomachs and thousands of angry voices, all moving toward the gates of Versailles. The immerse into the scandal of the necklace was the final spark in a forest of dry wood. As the moon sets over the hall of mirrors, the cold glitter of the diamonds fades, replaced by the orange glow of torches in the distance. The queen stands at her window, the silence of her room now broken by the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the people's march. The world is no longer asking for diamonds, it is screaming for bread, and the transition into the storm of the revolution is now inevitable. Breathe in the sharp, cold air of the evening. Feel the weight of the silence in the palace, a silence that is no longer peaceful, but heavy with the breath of a dying era. The diamonds are gone, scattered to the winds of history, leaving behind only the cold, hard truth of a nation's fury. We are moving with the queen now, leaving the world of scandals and jewelry behind, drifting toward the great dark gates where the people wait. The transition is as heavy as a falling curtain, a slow movement from the artificial light of the court to the raw, burning light of the revolution. Let the steady, rhythmic beat of the distant drums lull you into a state of absolute, heavy stillness, even as the world begins to change forever. The journey through the diamond necklace affair is over. The reveal has been made, and the disillusionment is complete. The queen is innocent of the crime, but she is guilty in the hearts of her subjects. And in the end, that is the only verdict that matters. As you close your eyes, imagine the hall of mirrors standing dark and empty, the mirrors reflecting only the flickering light of the torches outside. This is the sleep anchor of the storm, the realization that some things, once broken, can never be mended. You are safe in this silence, protected by the distance of the years and the rhythm of the story. The drums are loud, but they are far away, and the night is still long enough for sleep. The final clink of a diamond sounds in the dark, a small, lonely note that marks the end of the age of gold. It is the end of the golden trap, and the beginning of the storm. The transition is taking its first heavy steps, but for tonight, you remain in the quiet of the room. Let the image of the diamond necklace fade into the dark, replaced by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the night. You are traveling now, not through the scandals of the past, but through the landscape of a quiet, resting soul, toward a place where the light is soft and the night is full of peace. The story of the queen continues in the fire, but for now, there is only the quiet and the cold and the deep restorative sleep of the moon. The stars above Versailles are hidden by the smoke of the rising fires, but their light is still there, steady and ancient, beyond the clouds. Let your mind drift toward that light, toward the infinite, cool dark of the sky. There is no scandal there, no necklace, no Madame Deficit. There is only the vast, silent peace of the universe. You are traveling now, not through halls of mirrors, but through the landscape of a quiet heart, toward a place where the world is simple, and the night is full of grace. The story of the queen continues, but for now, there is only the quiet, and the stars, and the deep, restorative sleep of the long night. As the last diamond fades from your mind, feel the weight of the velvet blankets and the stillness of the air. The transition is complete, the scandal is over, and the revolution has begun, but you are at rest. The rhythm of the march is now just a heartbeat, steady and slow, guiding you into the softest of dreams. The queen is at her window, watching the fire, but you are in the dark, safe and sound, as the world of the sun finally gives way to the beautiful, endless dark of the stars. Sleep now, as the diamonds vanish into the shadows, and the only sound left is the heartbeat of history, steady and slow, pulling you into the deep, quiet rest of the centuries. The soft, pastoral silence of the Petit Trianon and the cold, crystalline glitter of the diamond necklace have both vanished, swallowed whole by a low, rhythmic thunder that begins at the very distant horizon of Paris. This is the beginning of the drift ending, a slow, solemn, and inevitable descent into the heavy velvet shadows of history. Imagine standing in the very center of the vast marble courtyard at Versailles, where the air is no longer scented with lilies or lavender, but with the sharp, metallic tang of cold rain and the acrid, thick smoke of 1,000 guttering torches. The sound of the mob is not a sudden, sharp scream, but a deep, vibrating, and constant hum, a collective heartbeat of a nation that has finally run out of patience. It is the rhythmic sound of thousands of wooden sabots striking the ancient cobblestones in a steady, relentless, and hypnotic cadence. Thump, thump, thump. For Marie Antoinette, the transition into the revolution is a movement into a profound and quiet solemnity. The girl who once danced light-footedly in the Hall of Mirrors is gone, replaced by a woman of stone who must now stand as a solitary pillar of dignity against the rising, dark tide of the storm. The body of this heavy transition is defined by the frantic, claustrophobic, and muffled atmosphere of the flight to Versailles. Picture a massive, unmarked carriage swaying precariously and rhythmically in the dead of a moonless night, moving slowly through the deep, black forests of the French countryside. Inside the carriage, the queen sits in a darkness so thick and absolute it feels like a physical weight against her skin. There is no gold here to catch the light, no silk to rustle, only the constant rhythmic creaking of the heavy leather straps and the frantic, internal beating of her own heart. This was the exact moment the fragile dream of escape finally fractured and fell away. When the carriage was eventually intercepted, and the royal family was forced back toward the city through long, suffocating lines of silent, accusing citizens, the psychological stress was so absolute that it manifested in a ghostly physical transformation. Her hair, once the vibrant color of spun honey and summer gold, turned stark, ghostly white in a single night, a sensory overload of grief and silent terror that marked the final, permanent end of her youth. She was no longer a symbol of fashion or beauty. She was a woman carved from cold, white marble, unyielding and still, carrying the entire weight of a dying empire upon her weary shoulders. And here is the powerful, quiet reveal of the Queen's final and most profound transformation. In the face of total and absolute ruin, the woman who had been mocked for years as a shallow spendthrift finally became a lioness. The internal conflict that had once been about silk gowns and gambling debts was replaced by a singular, fierce, and unbreakable devotion to the protection of her children. As the mob breached the palace walls and the stones were thrown with violence through her windows, she did not retreat into the dark safety of the cellars. Instead, she stood between the sharpened bayonets and her sleeping son, her spine as straight and cold as a steel sword, her voice calm and devoid of fear. She found a hidden strength that even her most bitter enemies could not help but respect, a solemnity that transcended her earthly titles and her vanished crown. She was no longer trying to be human to please the nobility, nor was she trying to be a goddess to appease the people. She was simply being a mother, protecting the only tiny piece of her heart she had left in the world. The disillusionment of the past had finally hardened into a diamond-like resolve, a quiet dignity that was far more radiant than any necklace she had ever worn in the light of the sun. As the carriage moved slowly through the dark, rain-slicked streets of Paris toward her eventual and final imprisonment, let the rhythmic, heavy swaying of the vehicle become your own final lullaby. Listen to the slow, repetitive, and deeply hypnotic creak. Sway, creak of the ancient wooden frame. It is a pendulum-like motion that pulls you deeper and deeper into the heavy, grounded, and somber atmosphere of the night. Sway, creak, sway. The sound is steady, low, and inevitable, like the turning of a great, heavy wooden wheel that can no longer be stopped by any human hand. Imagine the rhythmic clop-clop of the horse's hooves on the wet, black stone, a muffled, percussive beat that marks the slow passage of time and the closing of an era. These sounds are low, deep, and profoundly somber, pulling your mind away from the chaotic fires of the revolution and into a state of heavy, meditative, and absolute rest. The carriage is a small, dark world of its own, a safe, moving cocoon of shadow drifting through a landscape of fire and change. The air inside the carriage is cool, damp, and smells of old, worn leather and the silent night air. You can feel the transition beginning to take its final, permanent shape as the great, indifferent stone walls of the city close in around the royal party. The drift ending is a slow, methodical pulling of the soul toward the earth, a final grounding of the spirit after the dizzying heights of the Versailles mirrors. The Queen is perfectly silent now, her ghostly white hair covered by a simple, humble cap, her eyes fixed steadily on the unfolding darkness outside the window. The slow story of her life is reaching its final and quietest chapter, where the noise of the world is finally fading away, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic vibration of the wheels against the road. The transition is moving steadily away from the open, fragrant air of the gardens and toward the cold, unyielding, and silent iron of the conciergerie. The final transition of this night is marked by the heavy, echoing sound of iron bars sliding slowly into place. It is a deep, metallic clank that vibrates through the stone corridors of the prison and settles in the very marrow of the bones. The vibe of the night has shifted permanently from the freedom of the Trianon to the absolute hollow isolation of the prison cell. But even here, in the cold and the dark, there is a sense of ultimate, heavy peace. The roles have all been played, the masks have finally been dropped, and the long, exhausting struggle is over. Marie Antoinette is finally alone with her own soul, standing in the long shadow of the iron bars with a dignity that no prison, no mob, and no blade can ever break. The retention of this moment is the feeling of being completely grounded, completely still, and completely safe in the presence of history. Breathe in the cool, damp air of the stone cell, feeling its weight settle deep in your lungs. Feel the profound, ancient weight of the silence that surrounds you, a silence that is no longer an enemy, but a final, protective sanctuary. The rhythmic swaying of the carriage has finally stopped. The horses have been led away into the dark, and the world of the sun is finally at rest. We are moving with her now, leaving the heat and the smoke of the storm behind, drifting toward the absolute, heavy and silent stillness of the final sleep. The transition is as deep as the earth itself, a slow, majestic movement from the blinding light of the palace to the cool, restorative peace of the shadows. Let the steady, rhythmic breathing of the prisoner in the dark lull you into a state of absolute, restorative rest, even as the world of the living begins to fade into a distant memory. The journey through the storm is coming to a close. The fires of Paris are burning low, and the drums of the revolution have finally fallen silent in the mist. The world is at its quietest, the sacred hour, when the past and the present meet and dissolve in the dark. The Queen has reached her final destination, and you have reached your own place of rest. The story of the storm is a story of a woman who found her truest strength in the deepest dark. But tonight, for you, it is simply a long, slow, and beautiful lullaby of swaying wood and cold iron bars, guiding you toward the softest of dreams in the quietest, deepest corner of the night. The stars above the conciergerie are hidden by the thick, ancient stone of the ceiling, but their light is still there, eternal, cold and steady, far beyond the world of men and the fury of the mob. Let your tired mind drift toward that light, toward the infinite, silent, and perfect peace of the universe. There is no hunger there, no white hair, and no revolution. There is only the vast, silent grace of the stars. You are traveling now, not through the blood of the streets, but through the landscape of a quiet, dignified, and resting heart, toward a place where the world is simple and the night is full of grace. The story of the Queen ends in the light of history, but for now, in this moment, there is only the quiet and the dark and the deep, restorative sleep of the long night. As the last vibration of the iron bars fades from your mind, feel the weight of the heavy stone around you like a protective cloak against the noise and the light of the world. The transition is complete, the storm is over, and the long rest has begun. The rhythm of history is now just a single heartbeat, steady and slow, guiding you into the softest of dreams. The Queen is at her quiet prayers, watching the shadows move across the wall. But you are in the dark, safe and sound, as the world of the sun finally gives way to the beautiful, endless, and silver peace of the stars. Sleep now, as the carriage and the palace vanish into the mist, and the only sound left is the slow heartbeat of the earth, steady and deep, pulling you into the quiet rest of the centuries. The grand echoing halls of Versailles and the frantic, flickering candles of the masked balls have all faded into a single, small, and unyielding cell of cold gray stone within the conciergerie. This is the final morning, the absolute threshold of the drift ending, where the heavy weight of history settles into a profound and quiet state of forgiveness and peace. Imagine the air in this small, damp room. It is still and cool, smelling of old limestone and the faint, bitter scent of a final cup of cold chocolate resting on a rough wooden table. The Queen sits in a simple chair, the white light of a gray Parisian dawn filtering through a high, barred window to touch the stark white of her hair. There is no more noise from the mob, no more ticking from the king's clocks, and no more rustle of silk. In this narrow space, the world has shrunk to the size of a heartbeat, steady and slow as she prepares to step out of the light of the sun and into the long silver shadows of eternity. The body of this final hour is defined by a deep, unwavering poise, a dignity that is not born of a crown, but of a soul that has finally found its center. Picture her sitting at the small table, her trembling hands now steady as she dips a quill into a well of dark ink to write her final letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. The words flow across the paper with a rhythmic, quiet grace, speaking not of vengeance or anger, but of love for her children and a profound, quiet forgiveness for those who have brought her to this end. She is stripping away the last layers of Marie Antoinette, the queen, to reveal the raw, honest heart of the woman beneath. When she finally stands to face the guards, she refuses to be carried or pushed. She walks with a slow, deliberate cadence, her head held high, her spine as straight as the marble columns of her lost palace. On the scaffold, under the cold, indifferent eye of the morning, she does not scream or plead. She stands as a testament to a strength that the revolution could never truly understand, a poise that turned a place of execution into a cathedral of silent dignity. And here is the heartbreaking, soft reveal of her final moment on this earth, a gesture of such simple, profound humanity that it shatters the myth of the monster the world had created. As she ascended the steps of the guillotine, her vision perhaps blurred by the cold wind, she accidentally stepped on the foot of the executioner, Sanson. In that final second of her life, with the blade hanging above her and the crowd baying for her blood, her last spoken words were not a royal command or a political cry, but a gentle, sincere apology. "Monsieur, I ask your pardon. I did not do it on purpose." In that tiny, crystalline moment, she achieved a deep, emotional catharsis that history would never forget. She was not a goddess, nor a villain, nor a flag. She was a woman who, in the face of death, chose kindness over terror. She died not as a victim of the people, but as a master of her own spirit, leaving behind a legacy of grace that would eventually outshine the blood of the square. As the blade of history finally falls, let the fading heartbeat of an era become your final, most profound lullaby. Listen to the rhythmic, slow pulse of the city as it begins to go quiet in the wake of the tragedy. Lub-dub, lub-dub. It is the sound of a world that is exhausted, a cadence of a century that is finally drawing its last, deep breath. Imagine the soft, rhythmic swaying of the trees in the Tuileries gardens, a steady, sweeping sound that mimics the rise and fall of a long-held sigh. These sounds are low, distant, and incredibly heavy, pulling your mind away from the sharp edges of the scaffold and into a state of absolute grounded rest. The heartbeat of the Bourbon kings is slowing down, turning into a faint silver vibration that echoes through the stones of Paris. Let that rhythm guide your own breathing, slow, deep, and effortless, as the morning light fades into the timeless dark of the past. The air in the square is beginning to clear, the scent of the storm replaced by the cool, neutral smell of the turning earth. You can feel the transition taking its final shape, a slow drifting away from the individual life and into the collective memory of the world. The drift ending has reached its destination. The queen is no longer a prisoner of stone or silk. She is a ghost of the wind, a part of the rain, a fragment of the light. The slow story of the daughter of Austria has reached its final, quietest period. The noise of the revolution is a distant murmur, a fading echo that can no longer reach her. The transition is moving toward the legacy that remains: the silence of the gardens, the beauty of the Trianon, and the enduring grace of a woman who learned how to die with the same elegance with which she once learned to live. Breathe in the cool, silent air of the morning. Feel the profound weight of the peace that follows the storm, a peace that is now your own. The heartbeat of the era has faded into a single, steady note of silence. We are moving now, leaving the scaffold and the prison behind, drifting toward the absolute, heavy stillness of the eternal rest. The transition is as deep as the sea, a slow, majestic movement from the fire of the day to the cool, restorative shadow of the night. Let the steady, rhythmic pulse of history lull you into a state of absolute, restorative sleep. even as the world of the sun vanishes forever. The long, winding journey through the corridors of time does not end with the fall of a heavy blade or the silence of a prison cell. Instead, it returns, like a slow, ancient turning wheel, to the very place where it all began. Imagine yourself returning to the gardens of Versailles today, standing in the soft, silver-blue light of a modern twilight. The great palace stands in profound silence, a sprawling monument of weathered limestone and deep memory. Its once blinding gold leaf now dimmed and softened by the relentless passage of 200 years. The fountains are still, their marble basins catching the first light of the stars, and the hall of mirrors is dark, its glass reflecting only the ghosts of the past moving through the silent groves. But as you walk the quiet, moss-covered path toward the Petit Trianon, the atmosphere is no longer heavy with the sharp scent of judgment or the bitter tang of scandal. History has a long, slow, and rhythmic way of breathing, and in that deep breath, it has eventually found the infinite room to forgive. The ultimate stillness of the gardens today is a living testament to a woman who was always so much more than the tragic sum of her mistakes. In the cool evening air, she is no longer Madame Deficit, the villain of a hungry nation. She has become the enduring spirit of a vanished world, a soft whisper of silk in an age of cold iron. And as we stand here, in the deepening quiet of the present moment, we are left with a final haunting reveal that loops back into the very heart of our own human experience. It is a question that flickers like a lonely candle in the vast darkness of history. If you had been born into that same golden trap, stripped of your name and your home at the tender age of 14, and placed in a hall of mirrors where every single smile was a hidden dagger, would you have survived even the first day? If you were forced to walk in her silk shoes, with the weight of an entire world's expectations pressing down on your shoulders, would you have found the strength to face the fire with your head held high, or would you have vanished into the shadows of broken dreams? This is the eternal echo of Marie Antoinette's story, a philosophical loop that asks us to look into the mirrors of our own hearts and find the grace to forgive the frailties of others. It is a cycle of empathy that encourages us to return to the beginning of her journey again and again, not to sit in judgment, but to truly understand the fragile thread of a human life caught in the gears of fate. Now, let the slow, rhythmic, and repetitive phrases of the night wish you the deep rest you have earned. The sun has long since set on the Bourbon Kings, and the long protective shadows have finally claimed the gold, the marble, and the dust. The world of Versailles is at total rest, its silent mirrors reflecting only the eternal stars and the deep, velvet dark of the universe. The air is cool and still, the water of the canal is unruffled, and the story of the Queen is finally complete. It is time for you to let go of the heavy burdens of the day, to let go of the scandals, the storms, and the distant echoes of the revolution, and to sink into the absolute, grounding stillness of the night. The slow, steady rhythm of the earth is your only companion now, a deep and ancient vibration that pulls you down, layer by layer, into the softest and most restorative of dreams. The sun has set on the Bourbon Kings, and now it is time for you to close your eyes. The transition is finished, the loop is closed. There is nothing left for you to do, nothing left to remember, and nothing left to fear. There is only the peace of the absolute silence and the warmth of the dark. You are safe in the hands of history, protected by the great distance of the years and the rhythmic, silver pulse of the stars above the palace. Sleep now, as the Queen sleeps in the quiet heart of the earth, and the only sound left in the world is the heartbeat of the universe, steady and slow, pulling you into the deep, quiet, and eternal rest of the centuries. Listen to the wind in the trees of the Trianon one last time, a soft sweeping sound that says the world is at peace. Shh, the gold is gone. The mirrors are dark, but the grace remains. You are drifting now, floating on a sea of shadows, moving toward a horizon where the past and the future are one. The light of the sun is a distant memory, and the cool embrace of the night is your sanctuary. Breathe in the stillness. Breathe out the day. You are part of the story now, a quiet observer in the halls of time, resting in the same silence that guards the secrets of Versailles. The weight of the velvet blankets is a comfort, a reminder that you are grounded and safe. The journey is over, the destination has been reached, and the sanctuary is yours. The rhythm of your own breath is the rhythm of history, slow, steady, and inevitable. Let it lead you further into the dark, away from the light of the candles and into the light of the moon. The queen has found her peace, the king has found his silence, and the garden is waiting for the dawn. But the dawn is far away, and for now, there is only the night. The stars are bright over France, watching over the empty palaces and the silent rivers. They are the same stars she watched from her window, the same light that guided her through the storm. Let that light guide you now, not to a throne, but to a dreamless and perfect sleep. There is no more noise, no more hunger, and no more gold. There is only the rest, the deep, restorative rest of a soul that has found its way home. The loop is complete. The girl from Vienna has returned to the earth, and the story is ready to begin again when the sun rises. But tonight, the sun will stay beneath the horizon. The shadows are long and kind. The peace is absolute. Close your eyes. Let the world fade into the mist and surrender to the heavy golden pull of the centuries. The story is over. The rest is beginning. Sleep, sleep, sleep. The silence is your crown. The darkness is your silk. The night is your kingdom. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. Everything is at peace. The heartbeat of the earth is your lullaby, steady and slow, guiding you into the deep eternal rest of the night. Sleep now, and let the stars watch over you, just as they have watched over the gardens of Versailles for 1,000 years. The end is the beginning, and the beginning is rest.